What would you do if a 9-year-old boy stood up in court, looked straight at Judge Caprio and said, "If you punish my mom without hearing me, you're punishing the person who kept me alive"? Before this story is over, one courtroom will go from whispers and eye rolls to dead silence, and a judge known for seeing everything will be left completely speechless. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the truth doesn't always look pretty when it first walks into a courtroom. Because on the morning this happened, the truth did not look noble. It looked late. It looked tired. It looked defensive. It looked like a woman in a wrinkled burgundy H&M blazer, with chipped pale pink nail polish and a parking citation folded so many times it had gone soft at the creases. Drop a comment telling us what your first impression would have been, because almost everyone in that room got her wrong in the first 60 seconds. Her name was Elena Rivera. She was 34 years old, a certified nursing assistant from South Providence, and when her case was called in Providence Municipal Court on a windy Thursday at exactly 9:14 a.m., she walked up to the podium with her chin lifted just a little too high. Not confident, not calm. The kind of high chin people use when they are trying not to fall apart in public. Like this video, if you believe pride can sometimes be a person's last shield before they break. Standing beside her was a boy so small the wood rail almost reached his shoulders. Navy champion hoodie, faded jeans at the knees, scuffed black Nike sneakers with the left lace dragging. He had a Spider-Man backpack clutched to his chest with both hands and eyes too serious for a 9-year-old. Share this with someone who needs to see how fast judgment can turn into regret. The clerk, Renee Walsh, glanced down at the file. Case T-2601487, City of Providence versus Elena Rivera. 4 parking violations, 1 misuse of disability placard citation, 1 failure to respond notice, and fees related to vehicle impound. There was a soft ripple in the gallery, not loud, just enough. The sound people make when they've already decided who the bad guy is. And Elena, instead of beginning with humility, made the first mistake that nearly cost her everything. She exhaled sharply and said, "Can we stop acting like I robbed a bank over a parking spot?" You could feel the room shift. That sentence landed badly. One older man in the back actually leaned away from her as if entitlement were contagious. Assistant City Prosecutor Melissa Dean, crisp in a charcoal Ann Taylor suit, didn't react with her face, but she did straighten the stack of papers in front of her with the satisfaction of someone who just got handed Exhibit A without needing to ask. Officer Dennis Mello, the bailiff, turned his eyes toward Judge Caprio for half a second, because he knew what everyone else knew. Arrogance plays terribly in a courtroom. Judge Caprio looked at Elena over his glasses, patient but watchful. He had heard every excuse, every half-truth, every polished lie. His voice stayed calm. "Ms. Rivera," he said, "the city will tell me what the tickets say. You tell me why you're here." Elena crossed one arm over her stomach, defensive, tight. "I'm here because I was trying to handle real life, not because I wake up every morning planning to disrespect the law." That line was better, but it still carried edge, too much edge. And if you had frozen the story right there, if you had clipped those 10 seconds and thrown them on social media, most people would have typed the same thing. Entitled. Excuses. Another person who thinks rules are for everybody else. That's what made what happened next so powerful, because justice sometimes begins where certainty collapses. Melissa Dean rose and began laying out the city's case in a tone, so even it almost felt colder than anger. On January 6th at 7:11 a.m., Ms. Rivera's vehicle, a silver 2014 Toyota Corolla LE, Rhode Island plate KJ472, was cited for parking in an emergency fire lane outside the Hasbro Children's outpatient entrance on Plain Street. On January 18th, the same vehicle was cited for parking in a handicap zone using an expired temporary disability placard. On February 2nd and February 11th, the vehicle received meter and no parking citations in the Broad Street Commercial District. Ms. Rivera failed to respond to notices, and on February 26th, the vehicle was impounded. She paused, then delivered the sentence that made the room fully turn against Elena. The misuse of placard citation involved a permit originally issued to Rosa Rivera, now deceased. A few people actually gasped. Not loud, not dramatic, just that involuntary inhale people make when a detail takes a case from annoying to ugly. Elena's jaw flexed. She didn't deny it. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Is that your mother?" "Yes. And she passed away." Elena swallowed once, "Last year." "And you were using her placard." Elena hesitated a second. "Too long, I had it in the car." That answer was legal quicksand. Melissa Dean did not miss it. The officer's photographs show the placard hanging from the rearview mirror. There it was, clean, precise, damaging. The gallery had what it wanted now. A woman who parked where she wasn't supposed to, ignored notices, and used a dead relative's disability placard. Nobody needs context when they think they already have character. That's why these cases can turn so cruel so fast. We love simple villains. They save us from having to think. Judge Caprio's expression did not harden, but it settled. "Ms. Rivera, that is serious." Elena looked down at the wood edge of the podium, then back up. "I know what it looks like." Melissa Dean replied, "Respectfully, Your Honor, the concern is not only what it looks like. The January 6th incident created a documented access issue in an emergency lane. A responding pediatric transport unit reported a delay entering. Now the room changed again. Because unpaid tickets are one thing. Blocking an emergency lane where a child might need help, that hits differently. If you believe people should be held accountable when others are put at risk, tell us in the comments right now. Because at this point in the story, even Judge Caprio seemed to brace for the worst. The judge turned back to Elena. "Did your vehicle obstruct a medical transport unit?" Elena's mouth opened, closed, opened again, not the way they're saying. That was not a good answer either. "Then tell me the way it happened." She glanced down at the boy beside her, and for the first time the camera would have caught it if you were watching close enough. Her fingers trembled against the podium, not a little, noticeably, but instead of softening, she snapped. "I parked there because I had a reason." Melissa Dean's tone stayed composed. "Many people believe they have reasons. The law still exists." And that line, simple as it was, landed hard enough to make Elena's shoulders square up like a boxer hearing the bell. You could tell she wanted to fight the room, the city, the paperwork, the shame, the whole machine. She was seconds away from turning every bit of sympathy against herself. Then Judge Caprio noticed the child. He had not spoken, not once. He was just holding that Spider-Man backpack so tightly the straps were cutting into his fingers. "What's your name, young man?" The boy lifted his chin. "Mateo." "How old are you, Mateo?" "9. And why are you here today?" Mateo looked at his mother first. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, his mother. That one look told the whole room something important before he even answered. This child wasn't here for drama, he was here for loyalty. "Because she said I couldn't come," he whispered, "and I came anyway." A few people smiled at that. Judge Caprio almost did too. But then Mateo added, "I brought proof." Every head in that courtroom turned toward him. He reached into the backpack and touched a thick white envelope with both hands like it was breakable. Elena's eyes widened with real panic. "Mateo, no." The judge raised one palm gently. "Let me understand. Proof of what?" The boy's voice was small, clear, "Of why my mom did what she did." And just like that, the case was no longer simple. Not resolved, not saved, but no longer simple. The camera light near the courtroom wall blinked red. A stenographer paused one finger above the keys. Someone in the second row whispered, "Oh boy." because everyone in that room knew something had just shifted, and nobody yet understood whether it would save Elena Rivera or destroy her. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Dean, before I review anything from the child, I want the city's evidence." Melissa Dean nodded. "Of course, Your Honor." She handed up the first packet, parking enforcement photographs. Timestamped. January 6, 2026, 7:11:42 a.m. Silver Toyota Corolla in a red-painted fire lane outside the Hasbro Children's outpatient entrance. Hazard lights off, placard visible, front wheel slightly angled, the kind of image that makes guilt feel obvious. Then came stills from Officer Tyler Hint's body cam from January 18th. Elena standing by the driver's door in a black Columbia jacket, one hand raised, her face visibly tense. The placard hanging. Officer Hint's writing the citation. Her mouth open mid-sentence. Melissa said, "The city also has notice records showing the defendant did not respond to mailed citations." Judge Caprio glanced at Elena. "Did you receive the notices?" Elena answered too fast. "Not all of them." "You received some." "I got papers. I had other things going on." That answer again was true enough to sound slippery. Melissa continued, "The city is seeking the standard fines, towing and storage costs, and review of the placard misuse for possible escalation due to the permit holder's death." Mateo's head turned sharply at the word death. He looked at his mother, and for a second he was not a brave little advocate. 8. He was just a child hearing adults say hard words in hard tones about a family wound that had not healed. Judge Caprio noticed. He notices things. That's why moments like these become unforgettable. "Ms. Rivera," he said more quietly, "start at the beginning, not the legal beginning, the human beginning." That line changed the air. Elena inhaled slowly. For the first time, the attitude cracked just a little. "The human beginning," she repeated. "Yes, help me understand before I help decide." She stared at the floor for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then she lifted her face and began in a voice that was still stubborn, still embarrassed, but less sharp than before. "I work overnights as a CNA at Cedar Grove Nursing and Rehab. 3/12s most weeks, sometimes 4 if somebody calls out. My shift ends at 6:00 a.m. I pick him up from my sister Carmen's place on Douglas Avenue if he slept there, or I go straight home to Academy Avenue if he made it through the night okay. My son has asthma, bad asthma, not the kind where you puff an inhaler once and go play, the kind where you count breaths." The gallery softened a fraction, not much, but enough. She went on. "My mother, Rosa, used that placard when I drove her to dialysis. She passed in May. I kept it in the glove compartment because I couldn't make myself throw it out." Melissa Dean stepped in immediately. "But on January 18th it was displayed." Elena turned toward her, that defensive heat flaring back up. "Yes, it was displayed." "Why?" Elena's eyes flashed. "Because I was late to the pharmacy and my son needed." Judge Caprio interrupted, not harshly. Ms. Rivera answered directly. The room held its breath. "Because I used it," Elena said. That admission dropped like a stone. You could feel the truth of it. She had done it. Not maybe, not accidentally. She had made a bad choice. And the worst part about honest stories is that they don't rescue people from their wrong decisions. They force them to stand next to them. Mateo tightened his grip on the envelope. Judge Caprio nodded once. "Thank you, keep going." So she did. She talked about the Corolla's heat failing on and off in December. About sleeping in the car outside her apartment one morning because she didn't trust herself to drive Mateo to school after a double shift. About albuterol refills that insurance covered some months and delayed others. About her younger daughter Lucia, age 4, who stayed mostly with Carmen when Elena's schedule became impossible. About the day her mother's hospital bracelet finally got thrown away because Mateo found Elena crying over it in the kitchen. Then she said the sentence that made half the room suddenly understand why she had walked in with her chin so high. I was drowning, and after a while drowning people don't look graceful. That was the first truly shareable line of the day. Judge Caprio wrote something down. Melissa Dean was not unmoved, but prosecutors do not live on sympathy. They live on facts. And while drowning, you chose to use an expired placard belonging to a deceased person and park in a fire lane. Elena's mouth tightened. Yes. Do you dispute that a pediatric transport vehicle encountered obstruction on January 6th? I dispute that I caused what they're saying I caused. Were you parked there? Yes. Then explain the difference. Elena looked over at Mateo again. Because my son couldn't breathe. No one spoke. Melissa let the silence sit for just a second before saying, Your Honor, medical emergencies do not grant private citizens unlimited authority to block access points. True, brutally true. And this is where the story got sharp, because now both things could be true at once. Elena could be a desperate mother and still be wrong. The city could be technically correct and still be missing something human. That tension is what keeps people watching. It's what keeps a courtroom from becoming a spreadsheet. Judge Caprio asked, Was your son having an asthma attack at that moment? Elena nodded, Yes. Why not call 911? I was already there. At the hospital. At the outpatient side entrance. I thought if I could get him inside faster than waiting for a call, I'd save time. Did you leave the vehicle unattended? For less than 2 minutes. Melissa added, the citation officer recorded 4 minutes and 21 seconds. Elena turned, and how long was he watching before he hit record? Melissa did not answer that directly. Now there was movement in the gallery, not because Elena had won anything, not even close, but because she had finally said something that sounded less like excuse and more like challenge. Timing matters, so do missing seconds. Judge Caprio turned to Melissa. Do you have body cam or surveillance connected to January 6th? We have body cam excerpts from Officer Hinz and still captures from the entrance camera. Full hospital surveillance was not initially included in the municipal packet. Why not? It was not necessary for citation issuance. The judge's eyebrows rose just a fraction. Necessary for issuance and useful for understanding are not the same. That was quote number 2, and people in the room knew it. Mateo looked up at the judge with the first tiny flicker of hope on his face. Judge Caprio continued, Do we have the body cam excerpt available? Renee Walsh signaled to the monitor clerk. The flat screen mounted to the left of the bench flickered on with a soft click. Static. Buffer. Then gray hallway light filled the screen. Officer Tyler Hinz's voice came through first, calm and official. Ma'am, you can't leave this vehicle here. Then Elena's voice, louder than it needed to be, sharp with panic. I said I'm coming. My son can't breathe. On the screen, she emerged from the entrance carrying a nebulizer mask in one hand, papers in the other. Her hair was half out of its elastic. Her face looked wild. Not villain wild, cornered wild. Officer Hinz replied, You are blocking an emergency lane. And Elena snapped back, Then ticket me after he gets air. That line hit the room like a slap. You could hear someone whisper, Wow. Because clipped like that, it sounded awful, self-righteous, reckless. A mother putting her own emergency above everyone else's. Melissa Dean let the clip end there. Your Honor, the city submits this as evidence of knowing disregard. If you were watching this on a channel, this is exactly where people would flood the comments. Some would defend her. Some would roast her. Most would not wait for the next minute that changed the whole meaning of the first one. That's why I always say patience is a form of intelligence. Like this video, if you've ever seen a short clip make someone look guilty before the full story came out. Judge Caprio remained still. Is that the entire clip? Melissa hesitated. It is the portion relevant to the citation. That answer did not help her. Is that the entire interaction? No, Your Honor. Then I'd like the rest. A pause. We do not currently have it queued. Then we will wait. There are few courtroom phrases more powerful than that. We will wait. It means the fast version of truth is no longer enough. While the clerk worked to retrieve the rest, Judge Caprio looked at Mateo again. You brought proof. What kind of proof? Mateo swallowed hard. Some of it is letters. Who are the letters from? He glanced at the envelope. Me, Dr. Patel, my teacher, and one more. Elena whispered, Mateo, please. The boy didn't move. And that was when everyone in the room understood that whatever was inside that envelope, this child had come prepared to go against his mother's wishes to save her. A 9-year-old had decided the adults might fail her if he did not step in. Tell us in the comments if you think a child should ever have to do that, because the answer says a lot about what you think adults owe each other. The full body cam took another minute to load, and during that minute the room sat in a strange silence, the kind that hums. A woman in the back row uncrossed her arms. A young man waiting on his own ticket leaned forward with both elbows on his knees. Even Melissa Dean's expression shifted from prosecutorial certainty to professional caution. She knew as well as anyone that partial footage can be a trap. When the screen came back, the video restarted from earlier. This time it began 32 seconds before the clip the city had shown. That mattered. Officer Hint's body cam showed Elena Rivera pulling hard into the red zone with the right turn too wide and too fast. The passenger door opened before the vehicle fully stopped. Mateo stumbled out, hunched, one hand on the door frame. His breathing was audible even through the body cam mic. Thin, tight, terrible. A high wheeze threaded through each inhale like someone dragging a zipper slowly across metal. The courtroom changed instantly. Anybody who had ever heard a child struggle to breathe knew that sound. Elena came around the car, not polished, not calm, not thinking about law, optics, cameras, or city ordinances. She was half carrying, half pushing Mateo toward the entrance while shouting, "He needs help now." A receptionist inside the hospital doors waved them in. Then the screen showed what had not appeared in the city's selected excerpt. A Cisco delivery truck nosing halfway into the same lane from the opposite side 20 seconds later, much larger than Elena's Corolla, lingering there while a transport van approached and paused. Officer Hint's own voice came through clearer now. "Hey, move that truck, now." The transport delay everyone had pinned on Elena had suddenly become less clean, less direct, less convenient. Melissa Dean's jaw tightened. The clip continued. An orderly rolled out with a portable oxygen tank. Mateo sat on the curb, mask over his face, shoulders jerking with each breath. Elena came back outside with papers and saw the officer writing the citation. Th. It was the moment the city had chosen to start from. Not the panic, not the wheeze, not the truck, not the oxygen. Just the argument. The room was quiet enough to hear the monitor's faint electrical buzz. Judge Caprio let the silence sit. Then he asked, "Ms. Dean, was the court informed that a second vehicle obstructed the lane?" Melissa answered carefully. The citation remains valid regardless of later contributing traffic. That was not my question. No, Your Honor, that specific detail was not highlighted. Not highlighted. Everyone heard it. Everyone registered it. A child gasping for air had been reduced to a technicality, and a second vehicle had been edited into irrelevance. Elena stared at the screen with tears she clearly hated having in public. Mateo didn't look at the monitor at all. He looked only at his mother. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, cleaned them once and put them back on. "The law sees the act," he said softly, but justice must also see the moment. Quote number 3. And if this had ended there, it still would have been memorable, but it was only the start. Melissa Dean regrouped quickly. Your Honor, even with the contextual footage, the defendant still knowingly parked in the emergency lane and still unlawfully used a placard issued to a deceased individual. The city's position remains that repeated conduct and failure to respond justify penalties. That was true, painful, stubborn truth again. Judge Caprio nodded. I agree, context does not erase responsibility. Elena closed her eyes. There it was, the floor she had been standing on crumbling again. Then the judge asked, Ms. Rivera, why did you ignore the notices? This time her answer came without attitude. Because once I couldn't pay one, opening the rest felt like opening proof that I was failing at everything. No sarcasm, no edge, just exhaustion. Did you intend to contest them? At first. Then my car got towed and I lost 2 shifts trying to get Mateo's school nurse forms fixed, and I kept moving the papers from table to counter to drawer like if I didn't look straight at them maybe they'd stop being real. There was a woman seated near the aisle, maybe in her 50s, who actually wiped her eyes at that. Not because Elena had been cleared, because that sentence was too recognizable. People don't always ignore problems out of disrespect. Sometimes they ignore them because shame makes paper feel radioactive. Judge Caprio asked, what happened after the tow? Elena laughed once, but it was not humor. I borrowed $80 from my sister for groceries and pretended that was my biggest problem. And the placard. She finally looked ashamed in a way no prosecutor could force. I should not have used it, I know that. Why did you? Because the pharmacy on Broad had no close parking, and I was in a rush. And because after my mother died, I started making little bad choices that felt small compared to everything else. Then the small choices stacked up. That might have been the most honest sentence she said all day. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. That's how trouble works. Mateo shifted the envelope from one hand to the other. His knuckles were white. He was waiting for something, for permission, for collapse, for the moment adults finally admitted they weren't seeing enough. The prosecutor then introduced another piece of evidence. A letter from Pediatric Transport Supervisor Caleb Mercer notes that on January 6th, access to the entrance area was disrupted during a child intake transport involving a patient named Lily Chen, age 7. The delay was estimated at between 45 and 75 seconds. There it was, another child, another family, another reason the room had been so ready to condemn. Layering victims changes everything, because now the audience doesn't just see a technical offense. They imagine another mother panicking in the back of an ambulance, another father staring at a monitor, another child whose life might have hinged on seconds. Judge Caprio read the letter, then asked, was the Chen family contacted for testimony? Melissa shook her head. No, Your Honor. The judge set the paper down. I would have liked that. Elena's face had gone pale. Now her wrong choice was no longer abstract. It was a choice with a possible human consequence, even if the exact degree of that consequence was unclear. And she finally seemed to feel the full weight of it. She looked toward the bench and said in a voice barely above a whisper, if I made somebody else's child wait, I will hate that for the rest of my life. That sentence hit harder than any defense. No performance, no self-protection, just horror. Judge Caprio studied her for a long second. That sounds different from how you started. Elena nodded slowly. Because at first I was trying not to be humiliated. Now I'm trying to tell the truth. There it was, the shift, the moment of realization, the beginning of humility. If you've ever watched somebody stop defending their pride and start defending their soul, you know how rare that is. Drop a comment if you think accountability means more when it's honest instead of rehearsed. Judge Caprio turned to Mateo. Young man, would you like me to read your letters now, or should your mother finish first? Mateo looked at Elena. She gave the slightest shake of her head. The boy's lower lip trembled once. He straightened anyway. Now please. Elena closed her eyes like she knew she had lost that argument. Officer Dennis Mello brought the envelope to the bench. It was thick, carefully organized with colored sticky notes sticking out of the top, not a random child's scribble stash. A file. Mateo had built a case. Judge Caprio opened it slowly. The first page was a lined sheet torn from a school notebook, folded neatly. Blue pencil. Child handwriting, heavy pressure, letters too large in places, too small in others. Judge Caprio asked, would you like me to read this silently or aloud? Mateo whispered, aloud. The boy looked terrified, determined. The combination almost broke the room before the words even started. Judge Caprio began. Dear Judge Caprio, my name is Mateo Rivera, and I am 9 years old, and I know I am not supposed to tell a judge what to do. But I think grown-ups listen better when they are not busy. My mom is always busy, so I came. A few people let out tiny, involuntary laughs through their noses. The kind that happen when innocence says something devastatingly accurate. The judge continued. My mom gets mad loud when she is scared. That makes people think she is mean. She is not mean. She is tired. She works at the place with old people, and sometimes she smells like hand soap and coffee, and she still makes me do my inhaler before she sleeps. Elena put one hand over her mouth. My grandma Rosa died, and after that my mom stopped throwing away things that belonged to her. That is why the car still had the card. I told her not to throw it away because I thought if we kept it, maybe Grandma would still know where to find us. The courtroom went still. Nobody had been prepared for that. Not the legal detail, the child logic, the way grief keeps objects alive because a kid believes memory might need directions. Judge Caprio cleared his throat and kept reading. On the morning of the hospital, my chest was hurting, and I was making the bad whistle sound. My mom did not park there because she is bad. She parked there because I was scared, and she was more scared than me. Mateo stared at the floor. Tears were falling now, quiet and steady, onto the front pocket of his hoodie. Judge Caprio's voice softened further. She told me later she should not have done it. I know that already. But if you only look at what she did wrong, you are missing what she always does right. She stays. That line traveled through the room like current. Because suddenly the case wasn't about parking anymore. It was about absence and presence. About how many people fail children quietly every day, and how one exhausted mother with too much pride had still, somehow, never left. Elena broke then, not dramatically, no collapse, no wail, just silent tears spilling while she stood completely still like any movement might shatter her. Judge Caprio paused before the next line. My dad left when I was 6. He said he would call on Tuesdays. He does not call on Tuesdays. My mom still stays. There were people in that room who looked away because eye contact would have been too much. And Judge Caprio, who has heard thousands of stories, did something rare. He stopped reading for several seconds. The room could hear Mateo breathing. Not wheezing now, just breathing, steady, present, the sound his mother had fought so hard to protect. When the judge resumed, his voice had changed. I know she should not use a dead person card. I know rules are rules. My teacher says rules are how we keep everybody fair. But my teacher also says fairness is not the same as easy. My mom's life is not easy. That was the point where even Melissa Dean's face softened. Judge Caprio reached for the second letter. It was from Dr. Annika Patel, pediatric pulmonologist, Hasbro Children's Asthma Clinic. It confirmed Mateo's severe persistent asthma diagnosis, 2 ER visits in December, one urgent respiratory event on January 6th, and a documented recommendation that caregivers seek immediate treatment if symptoms escalated rapidly. The third letter was from Mateo's fourth-grade teacher, Mrs. Sarah Delgado of Vesey Street School. Mateo often arrives tired after nights of interrupted sleep due to respiratory issues at home, it read. His mother communicates consistently, attends meetings when able, and advocates fiercely for both Mateo and his younger sister despite extreme financial strain. In my professional opinion, any presentation of rudeness or urgency should be understood in the context of chronic crisis, not indifference. The Judge nodded as he read. Then he reached the final item. A folded, creased receipt packet from a Broad Street Walgreens. Prescription refills, albuterol sulfate, nebulizer tubing, pediatric spacer. Dates matched the citations. The kind of evidence nobody glamorous ever talks about, not dramatic exhibits, just proof that emergency has paperwork too. And yet the case still was not over. Because the city's strongest point remained standing like a post in the middle of everything. Elena had knowingly used the placard. Judge Caprio looked at her carefully. Ms. Rivera, your son has told me who you are when no one's watching. Your doctor and his teacher support his account, but you did misuse the placard. You did ignore notices, and by your own admission, you made what you call little bad choices. Why should this court not treat those choices seriously? This was the moment, the choice or consequence moment, the place where stories stop being emotional and become moral. Elena wiped her face and answered without any of the armor she wore at the start. Because if you need to treat them seriously, do it. I'm not asking you to pretend I didn't do it. I'm asking you not to mistake desperation for character. Quote number 4. The room felt it. She continued, I was wrong. I know that now in a way I didn't let myself know before. And if another child was delayed because I made a panic choice, I'm sorry in a way that's going to sit on me for a long time. But I am not a scammer. I'm not using my dead mother to cheat life. I'm a tired woman who kept one wrong thing hanging in her car too long because grief and money and fear made me stupid. Nobody moved. Then she said something even braver. If you suspend my license, I'll survive it somehow. If you fine me, I'll pay in pieces. But please don't look at my son and think the only lesson here is that his mother is selfish. That's not the lesson. Mateo started crying harder. Judge Caprio sat back, exhaled, and for the first time all morning seemed genuinely torn. That's when Melissa Dean stood up again and said, Your Honor, the city has one additional document. Everyone looked at her. She lifted a sealed envelope from her file. This came in this morning from Mr. Marcus Chen, father of Lily Chen, the transport patient referenced in the supervisor's letter. He requested that it be entered into the record if the January 6th incident was discussed. Now the room tilted again. Because whenever a harmed family enters a story, people assume punishment is about to get sharper. Judge Caprio nodded, please provide it. Melissa handed it up. The judge opened it and scanned the first few lines. His expression changed immediately. Would you like this read aloud, counsel? Melissa said, Yes, Your Honor, I think it should be. He began. My daughter Lily was the child in the transport van on January 6th. We were told there was a brief delay at intake. For several weeks I was angry at the driver of the silver sedan because when your child is sick, every second feels like theft. But after requesting the incident report through the hospital and viewing the full footage, I no longer want that mother punished as if she acted from selfishness. The room went dead quiet. Judge Caprio kept reading. I watched her carry her son and I recognized the face. It was the same face my wife had when Lily had her first seizure. Not rude, not entitled, terrified. He looked up once, then continued. My daughter is stable now. If another parent made a bad choice because they believed it would get their child help faster, I understand that in my bones. Please tell that mother this. Fear makes fools of good people. I know because I have been one. That was quote number 5, though it wasn't from the judge. Elena's knees nearly buckled. Officer Dennis took half a step forward on instinct. Marcus Chen's letter went on. I do not excuse misuse of permits or blocking lanes, but if mercy is available in this courtroom, I ask that some of it be used here. A child who defends his mother in public is telling you what kind of home he comes from. Now people were openly crying. Not everyone, but enough that the energy of the courtroom had transformed completely. At the beginning of the hearing, Elena Rivera was a woman everybody was prepared to judge. Now she was a flawed, grieving, overworked mother being defended by the very people her mistake could have harmed. This is why certain moments become the most talked about ones, because they force everyone watching to confront the speed of their own condemnation. Like this video, if you believe mercy means more when it comes from someone who actually had a right to be angry. Judge Caprio set the letter down and rested both hands on the bench. Ms. Rivera, he said, do you understand how close this came to going very differently? She nodded through tears, yes. I believe you do now. I'm not sure you did when you walked in. No, she admitted, I was still trying to win. And now I'm trying to deserve the second chance I'm asking for. That answer mattered deeply. The judge looked at Mateo. Young man, step closer. Mateo did. What made you decide to come today, even though your mother told you not to? Mateo sniffed hard and answered with the devastating honesty only children have. Because adults talk about paperwork when they get nervous, and I thought somebody had to talk about her. There are lines written by professionals, and then there are lines spoken by children that no professional could ever improve. That was one of them. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Even the stenographer paused to blink away tears. Judge Caprio asked, did your mother know about these letters? Mateo shook his head. Only Dr. Patel's, not mine. Who helped you organize this? My Aunt Carmen put sticky notes because she said judges like things neat. That cracked the room just enough to let a little oxygen back in. Then Judge Caprio said, tell me something, Mateo. What do you want me to do? The boy looked at the judge with a seriousness too old for his face. I want you to tell her she was wrong in a way she remembers, but not in a way that breaks her. That did it. There it was, the line that would have gone everywhere, the line millions would replay, the line that would make people stop scrolling. Because it was everything justice is supposed to be in a single sentence. Not denial, not escape, not punishment for punishment's sake, truth with a future. Judge Caprio went silent. Not the normal silence judges use to build authority, a real silence. The kind that happens when wisdom arrives before words do and a person has to catch up to it. He looked down, then at Elena, then back at Mateo. For a long moment, he said nothing at all. The entire courtroom could hear the building HVAC hum and the soft rustle of somebody's coat in the gallery. Nobody coughed. Nobody shifted. It felt almost holy, and everyone knew they were inside a moment that would live longer than the docket number printed on the file. When Judge Caprio finally spoke, his voice was lower than before. A child telling the truth has a sound adults cannot fake. Quote number 6. He turned to Elena. Your son did not come here to rescue you from consequences. He came to rescue you from being misunderstood. Elena nodded, unable to speak. And that, the judge continued, is one of the clearest mirrors a parent can ever be handed. She broke into open sobs then. Full, shaking, impossible to hide sobs. Months of held breath leaving all at once. Officer Dennis offered her a tissue box. She took one with trembling fingers. Judge Caprio let her have the moment. Then he did something that changed the story again. Ms. Dean, I want to review whether the city's handling of the January 6th packet omitted contextual material that should have been disclosed earlier. The defendant remains responsible for the violations, but the presentation to this court was incomplete. Melissa nodded, accepting it. Understood, Your Honor. That mattered too. Justice had moved in two directions now, toward Elena's accountability and toward the system's obligation to tell the whole truth. Then came the "but wait, there's more" twist nobody saw coming. Renee Walsh, the clerk, leaned toward the bench and quietly handed up another sheet she had been scanning while the hearing unfolded. Judge Caprio read it, frowned, then looked back at Elena. Ms. Rivera, did you submit an application for a hardship payment plan on February 20th? Elena blinked, yes. And did anyone respond? No. Renee spoke up from the clerk's desk. Your Honor, according to the municipal portal, the application was received and marked pending, but never finalized due to an internal routing error. A wave of disbelief moved through the room. Judge Caprio asked, meaning? Renee answered, meaning the defendant appears to have attempted to resolve at least part of the matter before the impound, but the request was not processed. Now even Melissa Dean looked surprised. Elena just stared. I filed that from my phone in the staff break room. And you heard nothing? Nothing. That changed everything yet again. Because now the narrative of pure neglect cracked. She had ignored some notices, yes, but she had also reached for help through the proper channel and been swallowed by a bureaucratic hole. Pride and panic had hurt her. The system had too. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. There's enough fault in this case to go around. Another line people would never forget. He turned back to Elena. Listen carefully. Misusing a deceased person's placard is serious. Parking in a fire lane at a hospital is serious. Ignoring notices is serious. But so is incomplete evidence. So is an unprocessed hardship application. So is the reality that poverty makes people late to fix things the middle class would handle in an afternoon. Quote number 7, maybe the strongest one yet. The G. Allery was no longer just watching. They were absorbing, learning, recalculating. Then the judge asked a question that sounded simple but cut to the core. Do you want mercy or do you want change? Elena answered immediately, change. Good, he said, because mercy without change is just delay. Quote number 8. And that was the breaking point of the entire story. The judge began structuring a resolution, aloud so every person in that room would understand both the compassion and the boundary. Here is what I am going to do. The fire lane violation will stand, but the fine will be reduced in light of the medical emergency context and the incomplete presentation of the obstruction facts. The placard misuse citation will stand, because grief is not a permit. The meter and parking citations will be consolidated. Towing and storage fees will be recalculated with review of the hardship application date. I am ordering community service hours to be completed not in a generic municipal setting, but, if available and approved, in support of a pediatric asthma education program or a hospital family assistance network. I want the consequence connected to understanding. Elena nodded so fast it was almost desperate. Yes, I'll do that. I'm also directing the clerk's office to assist you in setting a formal payment plan today before you leave this building. No more moving papers from counter to drawer. No more disappearing from the process. You show up. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Finally, he said, and the whole room leaned in. The court is not referring the placard matter for further escalation. Elena looked like she had been struck. Mateo let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Judge Caprio held up one finger, not because it wasn't wrong, because I believe the lesson has arrived. That line brought audible gasps. Justice served, compassion delivered, accountability preserved. It was exactly the emotional satisfaction people watch these stories for, but it still wasn't over. Because Judge Caprio had one more thing to say, and it was the thing that left him, in his own way, speechless before it came. He looked at Mateo. Your mother is going to remember this day for the rest of her life. Not because of me. Because one day when she felt the weight of her mistakes, her 9-year-old son stood up and told the room who she really was. Mateo covered his face and cried. Do not waste that gift, Ms. Rivera. I won't, Elena whispered. Then he looked at the boy again. And you, young man, you should know something. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes courage is walking into a room full of adults and refusing to let the person you love be reduced to her worst moment. That sentence sent a visible shiver through the gallery. At this point, if a producer had scripted the scene, people would accuse it of being too perfect. But real emotion doesn't care what looks believable from a distance. It just lands. Then came the unexpected compassion moment that pushed the whole thing into unforgettable territory. Melissa Dean, the prosecutor who had spent the morning arguing the city's position, asked if she could say something for the record. Judge Caprio nodded. She turned toward Elena, not as an opponent now, but as one person speaking to another. Ms. Rivera, the city's job is to enforce the rules, but I want to be clear about something. The reason those rules matter is because every family in crisis thinks theirs is the only one. I'm glad your son is okay. I'm glad Lily Chen is okay. I hope you never put yourself in the position of making that choice again. Elena, crying openly now, answered, I won't. Melissa gave one short nod. Then make this hearing count. It was not warmth exactly. It was something rarer. Respect after conflict. Accountability without cruelty. If you're still watching, comment the word mercy below, because what happened next is what truly separates a dramatic moment from a life-changing one. Judge Caprio asked Officer Dennis Mello to bring Mateo closer to the bench. The boy walked up, shoulders small, backpack still hanging from one arm. Mateo, the judge said, what do you want to be when you grow up? The question caught him off guard. He sniffed and shrugged. Maybe a lawyer, or maybe the guy who fixes lungs. A few soft laughs, a few smiles through tears. Judge Caprio smiled too. Whatever you become, keep this part of you, the part that tells the truth even when your voice shakes. Then he reached into his robe pocket, pulled out a small lapel pin shaped like the scales of justice that the court gave out sometimes during youth civic tour, and handed it to Officer Dennis, who passed it down to Mateo. The boy took it with both hands as if it were gold. And then, just when everyone thought the hearing had fully resolved, Elena did one final thing that completed her transformation. She turned toward the gallery. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, the people. The strangers who had watched her start wrong and end humbled. She said, I know some of you looked at me and saw exactly what I was afraid you'd see. A woman with excuses. I get that now. But if anybody here is sitting on papers because opening them feels like admitting your life got away from you, don't wait till your kid has to speak for you. That line landed like a public confession and a warning all at once. People nodded, not performatively, real nods. The kind that say, yes, I know that drawer. I know that pile of envelopes. I know that fear. Judge Caprio added one final line before calling the next case. The difference between a mistake and a pattern is what you do after you are seen. Quote number 9. Then he tapped the gavel once. Not hard, just enough. Case concluded. But the story was only reaching its resolution, because the best courtroom moments are not measured only by what happens in the room. They are measured by what happens after people walk out of it. Elena and Mateo stepped away from the podium slowly. Carmen Rivera, Elena's younger sister, who had been sitting quietly in the second row in a denim jacket and white Skechers, rushed forward and wrapped both of them in a hug so sudden Mateo almost dropped the justice pin. Elena laughed through tears for the first time that morning. Near the aisle, Melissa Dean paused long enough to hand Carmen the clerk's payment plan form and point her toward the assistant's window. No cameras would linger on that. No viral clip would feature it. But small dignities matter. Systems become human one gesture at a time. Outside the courtroom, the fluorescent hallway lights seemed too bright after everything that had just happened. Mateo sat on a blue plastic bench while Carmen filled out paperwork and Elena made 2 phone calls. One to Cedar Grove to ask for an extra shift. One to Dr. Patel's office to thank her for the letter. Her voice shook through both. Then Elena crouched in front of Mateo. For a second, it looked like she might scold him for coming against her wishes. That old instinct was still there. The instinct to protect herself with anger before vulnerability could land. Instead, she took his face in both hands and whispered, "You should not have had to do that." Mateo, wise in the painful way some children are, whispered back, "Then next time don't make me." That line stopped her cold. No judge, no prosecutor, no clerk, just the one person who knew her best saying the thing that could not be appealed. Elena nodded slowly, "Okay." They sat there in the hallway for several minutes, saying almost nothing. If you've ever had a moment where someone smaller than you made you become better than you were, hit subscribe, because that kind of transformation is the heartbeat of stories people never forget. Over the next 6 weeks, Elena did exactly what she promised. That matters. So many stories want the emotional peak without the disciplined follow-through. But redemption is boring before it is beautiful. It is forms and buses and calendars and swallowing pride on ordinary Tuesdays. Elena met with the court assistant's office that same day and signed a formal payment plan. $35 every 2 weeks. Not easy. Not impossible. She sold a gold bracelet her mother had given her when Lucia was born, and that hurt, but she did it willingly because for the first time she was choosing pain that moved her forward instead of pain that followed her around. The court connected her with Family Breath Rhode Island, a nonprofit asthma education network that partnered with clinics and schools. Her community service involved sorting donated nebulizer kits, packing Spanish-language instruction folders, and helping set up Saturday workshops for parents who had never been taught how to manage emergency flare-ups at home. The first day she walked in, she cried in the bathroom before clocking the hours, because the room smelled like plastic tubing and sanitizer, and grief mixed with gratitude in a way she had no words for. Mateo came with her on 2 Saturdays and sat at a folding table doing math homework while listening to parents ask questions she once would have been too proud to ask. How long between treatments? What if the school calls? What if I can't refill before payday? What if I panic? That last one always got her. What if I panic? Because she knew the answer now. Panic doesn't just make your heart race. It narrows your world until your emergency becomes the only thing that looks real. That's how good people make dangerous choices. 3 months later, on June 21, 2026, a plain white envelope arrived at Judge Caprio's chambers with return handwriting he recognized from the letter packet. Mateo Rivera. Inside was a new note, this time written more neatly. Dear Judge Caprio, I am writing because my mom said if somebody gives you mercy, you should report back like a grown-up. She finished all her hours. She put the papers on the fridge with a magnet so they do not hide in him. Or, she does not have grandma's card in the car. She took me and Lucia to the zoo with legal parking. Also, I got a B+ in math but an A in reading. My mom says tell you she still hears your voice in her head when she opens mail. Tucked behind the letter was a photo. Elena standing in a Family Breath Rhode Island t-shirt, hair tied back, smiling in a way that no longer looked guarded. Mateo next to her, justice pin clipped to his hoodie. Lucia on Elena's hip, grinning with two front teeth missing. On the table in front of them were inhaler demonstration kits and a sign that read, "Breathe first, panic last." Judge Caprio kept that photo. And here is where the story becomes more than a courtroom scene, because that hearing did not just reduce fines or stir tears. It altered behavior. It rippled outward. Dr. Patel later reported that Elena became one of the most reliable volunteer parent speakers in the clinic's emergency preparedness workshops. Not because she was polished, because she was real. She would stand in front of 10 exhausted parents and say, "I once made the worst kind of mistake. The kind you make when fear tells you there's no time to think. So listen to me. Make the plan before you need the plan." Parents listened. She helped 3 mothers fill out transportation assistance forms they had been avoiding. She sat with one father in the clinic corridor while he called his landlord about mold that was worsening his daughter's breathing. She became the kind of person who turned shame into usefulness. That's redemption when it's done right, not image repair, service. And remember Marcus Chen, the father who wrote the letter asking for mercy. 2 months after the hearing, Family Breath held a small fundraising breakfast at a community room near Roger Williams Park. Elena almost didn't attend because she hated public events where she thought people might know her story. Carmen pushed her to go. There, near the coffee urns and paper name tags, she met Marcus and Priya Chen in person. Lily was there too, pink cardigan, tiny glitter barrette, alive, laughing, drawing on a paper placemat with blue crayon. Elena froze when she recognized the name tag. Marcus stepped toward her first and said, "Our daughter should probably be in a room with fewer stale muffins than this." It broke the tension enough for Elena to breathe. She started apologizing immediately, but he stopped her gently. "I meant what I wrote. The footage told the story. Fear makes fools of good people. The question is whether they stay fools." Elena looked at Lily and then back at him. "I'm trying not to." Marcus smiled. "Looks like you're succeeding." That forgiveness twist mattered because it completed the arc. Outrage had become empathy. Empathy had become action. Action had become community. Justice had not ended with punishment. It had matured into repair. Like this video, if you think the strongest form of accountability is the kind that changes what happens next. By late summer, Elena's life still wasn't easy. Let's be honest about that. Beautiful courtroom moments do not cancel rent. They do not erase overnight shifts. They do not make asthma disappear or old grief stop stinging on random mornings. Her Corolla still rattled when it started. The driver's side visor still hung crooked. She still counted every grocery item before checkout and sometimes put yogurt back. Mateo still had flare-up nights where she sat on the edge of his bed timing breaths with her phone flashlight on. Lucia still cried when Elena left for evening shifts. But something fundamental had changed. The mail got opened. The forms got answered. The glove compartment got cleaned out. And maybe most importantly, Elena stopped confusing asking for help with failure. On September 3, 2026, Vesey Street School invited parents to back-to-school night. Mrs. Delgado had arranged a short family speaker segment on resilience and school attendance for children with chronic health issues. Elena almost said no. Public speaking still made her palms sweat. Mateo answered for her. "You stood in court," he said. "You can stand in a classroom." So she did. In front of folding chairs, faded bulletin boards, and a table of store-bought cookies, Elena told a room full of parents. The most dangerous sentence I ever believed was, "I'll handle it later." Later almost cost me more than money. It almost taught my son that silence is how adults manage shame. I'm trying to teach him something else now. A father in the back raised his hand and asked, "What changed your mind?" She smiled toward Mateo, who was pretending not to watch. "My son embarrassed me with the truth," she said. "Best thing that ever happened to me." The room laughed, then clapped. Not pity applause, recognition applause. That's when you know a story has become useful instead of merely moving. Months after the hearing, one local legal aid volunteer who had been in the gallery that day told a reporter, off the record, no nah. Means that it was the kind of case people think is about parking, until they realize it's really about how quickly institutions and neighbors flatten poor mothers into stereotypes. That sentence never made headlines, but it should have. Because the reason moments like this spread is not just that they are emotional, it's that they expose a larger truth. We often ask whether people broke a rule before we ask what was breaking them. And no, that does not excuse the rule breaking. That's important. The story only works because Elena was wrong. If she were purely innocent, this would be softer and smaller. It would flatter us. Instead, it indicts us a little. It asks whether we know how to hold two facts at once. She should not have done it, and she was not the monster people assumed. That moral complexity is what stays with viewers long after the clip ends. As for Judge Caprio, people around the courthouse said he mentioned the case only briefly afterward, but when he did, he repeated the same line. A child telling the truth has a sound adults cannot fake. He was right. Because Mateo's defense of his mother worked for one reason only. He did not ask the judge to erase reality. He asked him to see all of it. That distinction matters more than ever in a world that loves instant verdicts. And perhaps the most telling detail of all came in another letter sent much later, in November, just after Thanksgiving. This one was written partly by Mateo and partly by Elena in the same envelope. Mateo's part came first. Dear Judge Caprio, my mom says to tell you we had turkey from my Aunt Carmen and nobody got in trouble parking. Also, I got Student of the Month for being helpful. I think maybe standing in court made being called on in class less scary. Then Elena's handwriting began below his. Your Honor, I've now completed my payment plan ahead of schedule. Family Breath offered me a part-time outreach role helping families complete emergency action packets and transportation assistance applications. I accepted. I keep thinking about the thing you said, about the difference between a mistake and a pattern. I wanted you to know I heard it. Thank you for treating me like a person I still had time to become. Read that line again in your head. A person I still had time to become.